At 58, she lost everything, except a forgotten gas station and something hidden inside it. The courthouse doors closed behind Elaine, and just like that, 32 years were gone. No house, no savings, just a worn truck, a plastic bag of belongings, and a deed to a gas station she hadn't seen in years. When she finally reached it, the place wasn't just abandoned. It felt like it had been waiting. If you suddenly had to start over with nothing, where would you go? The courthouse doors closed behind Elaine Mercer with a soft, mechanical click. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. She stood there for a moment, one hand still on the handle, as if she might open it again and walk back in and say something she hadn't said before. The late afternoon sun stretched across the concrete steps, too bright, too ordinary for what had just happened inside. 58 years old, 32 of those married, reduced to a signature, a nod. A clerk sliding papers into a folder without looking up. Elaine let go of the door. The air outside smelled faintly of hot asphalt and cut grass from somewhere down the block. A lawn crew was working behind the municipal building, their equipment buzzing steadily, like nothing had changed. Everything had. She adjusted the plastic grocery bag in her hand. It crinkled, thin and overused, the kind you tell yourself you'll reuse but never do. Her name was written on it in black marker. Elaine, block letters, all business. Inside were the things Victor had left for her on the kitchen counter. A chipped white mug. The handle had a hairline crack she'd noticed years ago, but never replaced. A small photo frame, the glass smudged. She didn't look at the picture inside. A set of keys that didn't open anything anymore. And beneath those, folded neatly, the final copy of the settlement. She tightened her grip on the bag and walked down the steps. Her shoes made a dull, hollow sound against the concrete. She'd chosen them that morning without thinking. Comfortable, quiet, like she was going somewhere routine, not somewhere that would end a life. Victor wasn't outside. Of course he wasn't. He had left through another door, probably with his attorney, probably talking about numbers and next steps. He had always been good at that, moving forward before anything behind him had time to settle. Elaine didn't look for him. She crossed the parking lot slowly, feeling the heat rise from the pavement through the soles of her shoes. Cars sat in neat rows, clean and polished, most of them newer than hers. Her truck was parked near the edge, a faded blue Ford, paint worn thin in places where the sun had done its work year after year. The front bumper had a dent she never got around to fixing. The passenger door only opened if you lifted the handle just right. Victor had never liked the truck, said it looked like something you kept until something better came along. Nothing better ever did. Elaine reached it and stood beside the driver's door. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she set the plastic bag on the hood and reached into her pocket, pulled out the envelope she'd been given just before leaving. It was heavier than it should have been. Inside was the deed. Not to the house on Willow Crest, the one with the wraparound porch and the kitchen she had painted twice because the first color hadn't felt right. That house was Victor's now. The savings account, his. The retirement fund, his. Even the friends, the ones they had hosted for dinners and holidays, those had quietly shifted one by one to his side, like furniture being rearranged when you're not in the room. What Elaine had left was this. She opened the envelope and slid the paper out carefully. The edges were worn, softened by time. The ink slightly faded but still legible. Her father's name, transferred to hers years ago, a gas station, Route 17, just outside a town most people passed without noticing. She hadn't been there in, 15 years? Maybe more. After her father died, she had gone once, locked the door, told herself she'd come back when she had time. Time had come and gone. Victor had said it wasn't worth anything. Taxes barely justified keeping it. Better to let it sit. So she did. Let it sit. Let a lot of things sit. Elaine folded the deed again and slid it back into the envelope. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She picked up the plastic bag, opened the driver's door, and set everything on the passenger seat. The interior smelled faintly of dust and old upholstery, warmed by the sun. Then she walked around to the other side. Rusty was waiting there. The German shepherd stood beside the truck, his coat dulled with age, a streak of gray running along his muzzle. His eyes followed her, steady and quiet. He had been lying in the shade of a small tree while she was inside, but now he was standing. Alert. Watching. "You ready?" she asked, her voice low, almost out of habit. Rusty didn't move. He looked at the open passenger door, then at her, then back at the courthouse behind them. His ears twitched slightly. Not fear. Something else. Elaine frowned a little. "Come on, boy." She patted the seat. Rusty stepped forward, slow, deliberate. He placed his front paws on the edge of the door, paused, then pulled back. That wasn't like him. He had ridden in this truck for years, grocery runs, vet visits, long drives out of town when things at home got too quiet. He never hesitated. Elaine glanced at the courthouse again. Glass doors reflecting sunlight, people coming and going. No one looking at her, no one noticing. She turned back to Rusty. "It's just us now," she said, softer this time. The words hung there for a second. Then Rusty looked at her, really looked. And something in his posture shifted. He climbed into the truck slowly, carefully, like he was choosing to. Elaine closed the door behind him and walked back around to the driver's side. She sat down, the seat creaking under her weight, and rested her hands on the steering wheel. For a moment, she didn't start the engine. She just sat there, looking through the windshield at the parking lot, at the courthouse, at the ordinary world that had no place for what she had just lost. Her house was gone. Her marriage was gone. Her life, the one she had built piece by piece, was gone. All she had was a truck, a plastic bag, a dog, and a gas station she hadn't seen in years. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Then she turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then caught. Rusty shifted slightly in the passenger seat, settling in, his body angled toward the window, but his eyes still flicking back to her now and then. Elaine put the truck in gear. She didn't check her phone, didn't look at the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind her she needed to see. As she pulled out of the parking lot, the courthouse slipped out of view, hidden behind a line of trees and a curve in the road. Ahead, the street stretched out, uncertain, unplanned, but it led somewhere. It had to. Elaine tightened her grip on the wheel. There was only one place left that belonged to her. Even if she wasn't sure, it still did. She pressed the gas a little harder and drove. The town slipped away faster than she expected. Traffic lights turned into stop signs. Stop signs turned into long stretches of road where no one seemed to be in a hurry. The sidewalks disappeared. The houses pulled farther apart. Elaine kept both hands on the wheel. She didn't turn on the radio, didn't check the time. There was nothing she needed to hear and nowhere she needed to be, except forward. Rusty sat upright beside her, his body steady despite the uneven road. His head shifted slightly with each turn, nose working the air through the half-open window. Every now and then, his ears twitched at something she couldn't hear. The smell changed first. Less city, more earth. Warm dirt, dry grass. Something faintly metallic that reminded her of old tools left out in the sun. Elaine rolled the window down a little more. The air moved through the truck, lifting a strand of her hair and brushing it across her cheek. She tucked it behind her ear without thinking. The road curved gently. Then again, the further she drove, the less familiar everything became. And at the same time, something underneath it all felt known. Not recent, not clear. But somewhere in the back of her memory, like a song she hadn't heard in years but still recognized in the first few notes. She passed a gas station about 30 miles out. Newer, bright, clean. A family stood near the pumps, a kid laughing as his father tried to keep the nozzle steady. A woman leaned against the car, scrolling on her phone, sunlight catching the edge of her sunglasses. Elaine's foot eased off the gas for a moment, then pressed down again. She didn't stop. Rusty turned his head, watching the station as they passed, his eyes following it until it disappeared in the side mirror. "Not ours," she murmured. The words came out before she thought about them. Not ours. She hadn't called anything hers in a long time. The highway narrowed after that. 2 lanes, then one in each direction with barely a shoulder. Trees closed in along both sides, tall and uneven, their shadows stretching across the road like fingers. The sunlight flickered through the branches, hitting the windshield in quick, shifting patterns. Elaine squinted slightly, adjusting her grip. She recognized this part. Not clearly, but enough. There used to be a diner somewhere along here, a small place with a red sign that buzzed at night. Her father would stop sometimes on the way back from town. Bring her inside for pie he insisted was better than anything they could make at home. She slowed a little, scanning the roadside. Nothing. Just an empty lot where the grass had grown uneven and tall. She almost smiled. Time had a way of doing that. Taking things quietly, leaving just enough behind that you weren't sure if you remembered them right. Rusty shifted again. This time, he leaned slightly forward, paws pressing into the edge of the seat. Elaine noticed. "Easy," she said, glancing at him. But he wasn't restless. He was focused, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. They passed a narrow turnoff, barely marked, just a break in the trees and a worn patch of gravel. Rusty's ears snapped up. His head turned sharply toward it. Elaine's hands tightened on the wheel. She drove past it, then slowed. Something tugged at her. Not strong, but enough. She checked the rearview mirror. No cars behind her. No one waiting. She exhaled slowly, then eased her foot onto the brake and let the truck roll back just enough to line up with the turnoff. Rusty let out a low sound. Not quite a bark, not quite a whine, more like recognition. "You remember that?" she asked quietly. He didn't look at her. He was already looking down the gravel path. Elaine turned the wheel. The truck bumped onto the uneven road, tires crunching over loose stones. Dust lifted behind them, drifting into the trees. The canopy thickened almost immediately. Shadows cooled the air. The road narrowed further, winding gently upward. The surface cracked in places where roots had pushed through from below. Elaine drove slower now. Careful. Watching. Her fingers loosened slightly on the steering wheel, adjusting to the rhythm of the terrain. "I used to hate this part," she said, almost to herself. "Thought we'd break an axle every time." Rusty's tail gave a faint, slow movement against the seat. The trees thinned for a moment, and then a stretch of open hillside appeared to the right. Elaine glanced over. The view hit her all at once. Rolling land, faded fences, a distant ridgeline layered in soft blue, the kind that blurred at the edges the farther it went. She hadn't seen that view in years, maybe decades. She swallowed, kept driving. The road dipped slightly, then curved again around a stand of older trees, thicker trunks, deeper shadows. Rusty leaned forward. More now. His body tense but not afraid. Expectant. Elaine felt it too. A tightening in her chest. Not panic. Not exactly. Something closer to anticipation. The truck crested a small rise, and for a second, she thought she might have taken a wrong turn. The road looked narrower than she remembered, more worn. The edges crumbled slightly where the gravel had been eaten away over time. But then she saw it. Not clearly. Not yet. Just the top edge of something through the trees. A line that didn't belong to the forest. Man-made. Still standing. Elaine slowed the truck almost to a crawl. Rusty didn't move, didn't blink. They rolled forward together, both of them watching the same spot. The trees parted just enough, and the shape of the building began to form. Familiar. And not. Elaine's breath caught, just slightly. She hadn't been here in years, but the road had remembered. And now so had she. She kept driving slow, careful, toward the place she had left behind long before she realized she had, and couldn't ignore anymore. The truck rolled forward, slow enough now that the engine barely made a sound. Gravel shifted under the tires. The trees opened just a little more, and the gas station came fully into view. Elaine didn't stop right away. She let the truck drift closer, inch by inch, like approaching something that might disappear if she moved too fast. It was smaller than she remembered, or maybe everything else in her life had just gotten bigger. The building sat slightly crooked on its foundation, the flat roof lined with dark stains where rainwater had pooled over the years. The old sign hung above the entrance, its paint faded to a dull ghost of what it once was. You could still make out the letters if you knew what you were looking for. Mercer, Gas and Service, her last name. Still there. The pumps stood out front like relics. Rust had crept along their edges, the numbers frozen mid-transaction, as if someone had stopped time halfway through filling a tank. Weeds pushed up through cracks in the concrete. Vines had crawled along the sidewall, thick and stubborn, gripping the structure like they had no intention of letting go. Elaine brought the truck to a stop. The engine idled for a second. Then she turned the key. Silence settled in. Not empty silence. The kind that had weight to it. Rusty didn't move. He sat there, staring straight ahead at the building. Elaine rested her hands on the wheel for a moment longer. Then she opened the door. The heat outside was softer here, filtered through trees, carried on a breeze that smelled faintly of pine and something older. Metal, oil, sun-warmed concrete. She stepped down onto the ground. Gravel crunched under her shoes. The sound echoed more than it should have. Rusty climbed out slowly this time, landing beside her with a soft thud. He shook himself once, then stood still again, his body angled toward the station. Watching. Elaine picked up the envelope from the passenger seat, tucked it under her arm, and walked forward. Each step felt measured, not hesitant, just aware. She passed the pumps first. Up close, they looked worse. The hoses had cracked in places, the rubber stiff and brittle. One nozzle hung crooked, like it had been dropped and never picked back up. She reached out and touched the side of one. It was warm from the sun. Rough real. She pulled her hand back and kept moving. The front door was still there, a simple metal frame with a pane of glass, clouded now with dust and streaks where rain had run down it over the years. Elaine stood in front of it. She could see her reflection faintly, blurred, stretched, not quite matching the person she remembered. For a second, she didn't recognize herself. Then she reached for the handle. It didn't turn. Locked. Of course it was. She shifted the envelope under her arm and reached into her pocket. Her fingers closed around a small ring of keys, ones she hadn't used in years but had never thrown away. She tried the first one. Too small. The second. Nothing. The third. It resisted at first. Then turned. The lock clicked. The sound was sharper than she expected. It echoed faintly inside. Elaine pushed the door open. The hinges groaned. The air that met her was still. Thick. Dust and old wood, and something faintly chemical. Oil that had seeped into the building over decades and never fully left. She stepped inside. The light followed her in, stretching across the floor in pale rectangles. Everything was exactly where it had been, and completely different. The counter ran along the back wall, worn smooth in places where hands had rested thousands of times. Behind it, shelves stood half empty, hooks still in place where items had once hung. A cash register sat slightly off-center, old, mechanical. The drawer was cracked open just enough to show the dark space inside. Elaine took a few steps forward. Her shoes stirred the dust. Each movement left a mark. The air shifted around her, disturbed after years of stillness. She set the envelope down on the counter. It made a soft, hollow sound. Then she looked around more carefully. Details began to surface. Her father's reading glasses sat beside the register, one arm slightly bent. She remembered that bend. He had sat on them once, then fixed them himself with a pair of pliers. A small calendar hung crooked on the wall. The date circled. Years old. A pen lay beside it, uncapped, as if someone had just set it down for a moment. Elaine reached out and picked up the glasses. They were lighter than she expected. She turned them in her hand, wiping a thin layer of dust away with her thumb. For a second, she almost lifted them to her face, then stopped. She set them back exactly where they had been. Behind her, the door creaked slightly. Rusty. He stood at the threshold, not inside, not outside. Right in between. His body was still, but his eyes moved, tracking the room, stopping on certain points, then moving again. He wasn't afraid. He was alert. Listening. Elaine noticed. "Come on," she said quietly. Rusty didn't move. Instead, he stepped one paw forward, then stopped again. His gaze shifted toward the counter. Fixed. Not the shelves, not the door. The counter. Elaine followed his line of sight. Nothing looked different, nothing obvious, just worn wood and the edge where the top met the front panel. She frowned slightly, then shook her head. Later she murmured, more to herself than to him. She turned away and walked deeper into the room. There was a door to the right, leading to the repair bay, another to the left, narrow, with stairs behind it that led up to the apartment. She paused at the base of the stairs, looked up. The steps were steep, the wood darkened with age. A faint smell drifted down from above, stale air, closed space, something that had been sealed off for too long. She didn't go up. Not yet. Instead, she walked back toward the center of the room. The silence pressed in again. But now it felt different. Not empty. Not forgotten. More like waiting. Elaine rested her hand on the counter. The wood was cool, solid. She stood there for a long moment, breathing, listening. Behind her, Rusty finally stepped inside. One step, then another. But he didn't come all the way in. He stayed near the entrance, his body angled toward the counter, his eyes never leaving it. Elaine turned slightly, watching him. A small crease formed between her brows. "All right," she said under her breath. She looked back at the counter, at the worn surface, at the edges, at the places where time had left its mark. Something about it didn't feel random, didn't feel worn down the way everything else was. She couldn't explain it. Not yet. But she felt it, the same way Rusty did. The station hadn't been emptied. It hadn't been cleared out. It had been left, exactly as it was. Like whoever walked away expected to come back, or wanted someone else to. Elaine drew in a slow breath, then let it out. "Let's see what's still here," she said quietly. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the dust settled again, and the place, unchanged, unmoved, and somehow still holding its shape after all these years, waited for her to notice what she hadn't yet seen. Elaine didn't move right away. She stood behind the counter, her hand resting flat against the wood, feeling its surface, not just touching it, but paying attention. The grooves, the faint dips where coins had slid across for decades, the deeper marks where something heavier had once been set down, over and over. It wasn't just worn, it was used, purposefully. Rusty shifted near the doorway, not pacing, not restless, just adjusting his stance like he had settled into a position he intended to hold. Elaine glanced at him again. His eyes were still fixed on the same spot. The front of the counter, not the top. Lower. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers trailing down along the edge. The wood changed texture about halfway down. Smoother. Too smooth. She crouched slowly, the movement stiff from the drive, and ran her hand along the panel beneath the register. There. A line. Faint. Perfectly straight. Not a crack. Not damage. A seam. She paused. Looked closer. The dust had settled into it, making it easier to see once you knew where to look. The panel sat flush with the rest of the counter, but it didn't match the grain exactly. Subtle. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Or if you hadn't been shown where to look. Rusty let out a quiet breath. Not a sound of warning. More like confirmation. Elaine reached back toward the shelves behind her, her memory guiding her more than sight. Her fingers brushed against a row of tools, some still hanging, some scattered. She found a flathead screwdriver and brought it forward. She hesitated for just a second, then pressed the tip gently into the seam. Nothing. She adjusted the angle, pressed again. The wood resisted, then shifted, barely. But enough. Elaine leaned in, applying a little more pressure. The panel gave a dry, reluctant sound as it loosened, like something that hadn't been moved in a very long time. She worked slowly, carefully. The screwdriver sliding along the edge, lifting bit by bit until her fingers could take over. When the panel finally came free, It didn't fall. It eased outward, like it had been waiting. Elaine set it down beside her. Behind it was a shallow compartment built into the frame of the counter. Hidden. Deliberate. And inside, a stack of notebooks. A bundle of folded receipts tied together with a thin piece of twine. And a small metal tin, dull and scratched, the kind you'd buy at a hardware store without thinking twice. Elaine didn't reach for anything immediately. She just looked. Her breathing slowed. Rusty stepped forward, not all the way, but closer than before. His nails clicked softly against the floor as he approached, then stopped again, his head lowering slightly toward the open space. Watching. Elaine reached in. Her fingers brushed against the top notebook first. Leather cover, softened with age. Edges worn smooth where hands had held it, opened it, closed it, again and again. She lifted it carefully. It felt heavier than it looked. Not physically. Something else. She set it on the counter and slid the rubber band off. The pages inside were filled. Neat handwriting, small, precise. Her father's. She knew it instantly. She didn't open it yet. Instead, she reached for the bundle of receipts. Untied the twine, spread them out. Old paper, some yellowed, some barely holding together at the folds. Gas purchases, parts, repairs, but mixed in with them were others, different. Amounts written by hand, no company name, no official stamp, just dates and numbers. She frowned, picked one up, turned it over. Nothing on the back, no explanation. Just the amount, and his handwriting. She set it down and reached for the metal tin. It was cool to the touch. The lid stuck slightly before giving way with a soft pop. Inside, cash. Not much. Small bills. Folded neatly. Underneath them, a few more papers, smaller, tucked flat against the bottom. Elaine stared at it for a moment, then closed the tin, set it beside the notebook. Her attention drifted back to the pages. She opened the notebook slowly. The first page crackled softly as it moved. A date at the top. Years ago. Below it, a name, an amount, and a short line. Not a business note, not a transaction, something else. Elaine read it once, then again. Her brow tightened slightly. She turned the page. Another name, another amount, another line. Different person, different situation, same handwriting, same structure. She flipped another page, and another. The pattern held. Her father hadn't been tracking sales. He hadn't been keeping inventory. This was something else entirely. Elaine leaned against the counter, the notebook open in her hands. Her eyes moved faster now, then slower, then stopped. She glanced back at the receipts spread out beside her, picked one up, compared it. The handwriting matched. The dates lined up. Not random, not scattered. Connected. She reached for another notebook in the compartment. Then another. Each one filled. Each one following the same quiet, careful system. Rusty shifted again, settling onto his haunches now, his posture relaxing slightly, but his gaze still anchored to the counter, to the space she had opened. Elaine didn't notice the time passing. The light in the room shifted slowly, the sun lowering outside, stretching the shadows across the floor. Dust moved in the air with each turn of a page. The station, silent for years, now held the faint sound of paper moving, of breath, of something being uncovered one line at a time. Elaine closed one notebook and opened another, then another. Her father's voice wasn't there, but his presence was. In every word, every line, every name. Whatever this was, it wasn't meant to be seen quickly. It wasn't meant to be obvious. It was meant to be found. And now it had been. Elaine rested her hands on the open pages, her fingers spread slightly, as if steadying herself. She looked down at the compartment again, at what was left inside. And for the first time since she had walked into the station, she understood that this place hadn't been empty. Not even close. She exhaled slowly, then reached back into the compartment, pulling the remaining items out one by one, setting them carefully on the counter. There was more here. More than she had expected. More than she had known to look for, and she wasn't going to stop now. Not until she understood all of it. Elaine pulled the nearest stool behind the counter and sat down. The wood creaked under her weight. The sound echoed lightly through the station, then faded back into stillness. She opened the first notebook again. This time she read more carefully, not scanning, not searching. Reading, line by line, a name, a date, an amount, then a sentence. Short, direct, almost plain. Fixed radiator, didn't charge. Said he'd pay later. He won't. Elaine blinked once, turned the page, paid electric bill. 3 kids in the house, winter coming. Another page. New tires. Told her they were used. They weren't. Her hand paused on the paper. The words didn't feel dramatic. They weren't written to impress anyone. They just were. Matter of fact. As if what he was doing didn't need explanation. She turned another page, then another. The pattern held. Different names, different situations. Same tone, same quiet certainty. Elaine leaned back slightly, the stool shifting under her. She glanced at the receipts she had spread across the counter. Picked one up again. Compared the handwriting, same spacing, same pressure on the pen. She reached for another receipt. This one older. The edges worn thin. A number written in the corner. No business name, no official record, just an amount. She flipped back through the notebook until she found a matching date. There it was. Same number, same day. But the note beside it told a different story. Loaned cash. Didn't want anyone to know. Elaine let out a slow breath. She hadn't expected this. Not exactly. She had known her father helped people. Everyone said that. But this was something else. This wasn't occasional. It wasn't spontaneous. It was structured, intentional. She reached for another notebook, opened it halfway through. The pages were just as full, the handwriting just as steady. No gaps, no breaks, years of entries. She flipped back to the beginning. Dates, old ones, going further than she thought. Decades. Elaine pressed her lips together. "How long?" she murmured. Rusty shifted beside the counter, now lying down but still watching her. His head rested on his paws, eyes following her movements with quiet attention. She didn't look at him. She was somewhere else now. Inside the pages. She stood up suddenly, the stool scraping lightly against the floor, and walked toward the back wall. There was a corkboard there. She remembered it. Her father used to pin things to it. Notes, reminders, Small scraps of paper he didn't want to lose. It was still there, covered in dust. She brushed her hand across it. A cloud lifted, drifting in the light. Pinned to the board were old receipts, faded, some curling at the edges. She leaned closer. Read one, then another. Her eyes moved back and forth between the board and the notebook in her hand. Matching, checking, confirming, not guessing. She pulled one receipt free, carried it back to the counter, laid it beside the open page. Same date, same amount, same handwriting. But the receipt said nothing about why. The notebook did. Elaine stood there, one hand on the counter, the other resting lightly on the paper. It wasn't just records. It was a hidden layer, the part no one saw. She went back to the corkboard, pulled another, and another. Each time she walked back to the counter, checking, comparing, building something in her mind. A pattern, a system. By the time she finished, the counter was covered, notebooks open, receipts spread out. The metal tin pushed slightly to the side. Elaine stood in the middle of it all, breathing a little heavier now, not from effort, from realization. Her father hadn't just been helping people, he had been tracking it, quietly, carefully. Not for recognition, not for repayment, but to keep track, to make sure it continued. She picked up one of the notebooks again, flipped through the pages faster this time. Names repeated. Not often, but enough, with notes beside them. Paid back part. Still struggling. Check again in spring. Elaine stopped. Read that line again. Check again in spring. Her throat tightened slightly. He hadn't just helped once. He followed up. She turned to another page. Roof still leaking. Fix before winter if possible. Another. Kids doing better. Mother found work. Another. Car still running. Good. Elaine closed the notebook halfway. Her fingers pressed against the cover. This wasn't random kindness. This was responsibility. Taken on quietly, without asking, without telling anyone. She looked around the station again, the counter, the shelves, the tools. All of it looked the same, but it didn't feel the same anymore. It felt fuller, like the space held more than what was visible. Rusty lifted his head slightly, watched her. Elaine walked slowly toward the counter again and picked up one of the smaller pieces of paper from the tin. This one was different, not a receipt. A note. Folded once. She opened it carefully. The handwriting wasn't her father's. Different style. Looser. Less controlled. It was short. A thank you. No last name. Just a first name and a few lines written quickly. She read it twice, then set it down. There were more like it. She could see them now. Mixed in. Hidden among everything else. She didn't open them yet. Not all at once. Instead, she turned back to the notebooks, sat down again, and kept reading. The light outside shifted again, dimming slightly as the afternoon moved toward evening. Inside, the station remained quiet, but it wasn't still anymore. Not to her. Every page added something, Every entry connected to another, and slowly, piece by piece, the man she thought she knew began to change shape in her mind. Not disappearing, becoming clearer, more complete. Elaine leaned forward, her elbows resting on the counter now, her attention locked in. She didn't notice how long she had been there. Didn't think about the drive, or the courthouse, or Victor. Those things felt distant, muted. This was immediate, real. She turned another page, then another, and kept going. Because stopping now would mean leaving something unfinished. And she could feel it. There was more, a lot more. And she wasn't leaving until she found it. The light outside had shifted again. Elaine didn't notice when it happened. One moment the station had been filled with soft afternoon glow, and the next, the edges of the room had begun to darken. Shadows stretched longer across the floor, creeping up the counter legs, softening the corners of everything. She blinked slowly, looked up. The windows had turned a dull amber, catching the last of the sun as it dipped behind the trees. How long had she been sitting there? Elaine pressed her hand flat against the notebook, feeling the worn leather beneath her palm. Her father's handwriting was still open in front of her. A name. A date. A short line that said more than it looked like it did. She closed the notebook gently. Not finished, just pausing. Her shoulders ached slightly when she stood. Her legs followed a second later, stiff from sitting too long. Rusty lifted his head as she moved. He watched her, quiet, steady. Still there. Still anchored to this place. Elaine walked toward the front door and pushed it open. The hinges groaned again, softer this time, as if they had adjusted to being used. The air outside had cooled. The heat of the day had settled into something calmer, carrying the scent of dry grass, pine, and the faint trace of oil baked into the ground from years of work that had stopped too soon. She stepped out onto the concrete. The pumps stood in front of her, their shadows long now, stretching toward the road like they were trying to reach something. Elaine walked past them slowly. Her shoes scuffed against the ground, stirring small bits of gravel and dust. She turned in a slow circle, looked at everything, the building, the vines climbing the wall, the cracked edges of the pavement, the sign above the door, faded, but still there. Her name still there. She let out a breath. Long, quiet. Rusty came out behind her, stepping down onto the concrete and stopping just beside her. He didn't wander, didn't sniff around. He stayed close. His body relaxed now, no longer rigid but still attentive, like he had made a decision. Elaine looked down at him. "You knew," she said softly. He blinked once. That was all. She turned back toward the station. The front door was still open behind her, the interior dim but visible, the counter just barely catching the remaining light. She could see the notebooks from here. Spread out. Waiting. Her gaze moved slowly across the building, then out toward the road. Empty. Quiet. No cars. No voices. No one expecting anything from her. For the first time all day, no longer than that, there was no pressure, no schedule, no one asking where she had been or what she was doing or why something hadn't been finished yet. Just space and time. Elaine walked a few steps farther, toward the edge of the property where the gravel met the road. She looked down the way she had come. The trees closed in around the bend, hiding the rest of the world just out of sight. It would be easy to leave. She could get back in the truck, drive until she found a motel. figure something out in the morning. That had been her plan, if you could call it that. Just keep moving until something made sense. She turned her head slightly, looking back at the station again. At the door she had unlocked. At the space she had opened. At the notebook sitting on the counter, holding years of something she hadn't known existed. Her father had stayed here, every day. Doing work no one saw, keeping track of things no one asked about. And she had left. Not all at once, not in a single moment, but slowly, year after year, one decision at a time, until this place became something she only thought about when she had to. Elaine's jaw tightened slightly. Not regret. Not exactly. Something quieter. Something that didn't need a name yet. Rusty stepped closer, pressing lightly against her leg. She rested her hand on his head without thinking, her fingers brushing through his fur. He didn't move away. The sun slipped lower. The light softened again. And in that quiet, in that space between what had been and what came next, Elaine made a decision. She didn't say it out loud. Didn't need to. She turned, walked back toward the building. Slow, steady. The gravel shifted under her feet. Rusty followed, matching her pace. When she reached the door, she paused for just a second, looked inside, then stepped through. The station felt different now. Not as still, not as distant, like something had shifted just slightly to make room for her. She walked behind the counter again. The notebooks were exactly where she had left them. The receipts, the tin, everything waiting. Elaine placed her hands on the edge of the counter and leaned forward slightly. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Her voice didn't echo this time. It settled. Belonged. She straightened up, looked around once more. There was work to do. A lot of it. More than she could handle in a day, or a week, or maybe even longer. She didn't know where she would start. Didn't have a plan. Didn't have money. Didn't have help. But she had this. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like something. Rusty walked past her then, not stopping at the doorway, not hesitating. He moved fully into the station, crossed the floor slowly, and settled near the opening that led to the repair bay. He lay down, resting his head on his paws, his body relaxed in a way it hadn't been before, like he had found the place he was supposed to be. Elaine watched him for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Yeah," she murmured. "All right." She turned back to the counter, picked up the first notebook again, and began. Because she wasn't leaving. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until she understood all of it. And maybe, not even then. Elaine didn't sleep much that night. She had gone upstairs eventually, climbing the narrow staircase with one hand on the railing, each step creaking under her weight. The apartment above the station was exactly as she remembered, and not at all. Smaller. Lower ceiling. The air stale at first, until she cracked a window open and let the night in. She found the old mattress still in place. Thin, uneven, but usable. She lay down fully clothed, one arm resting over her eyes, and listened. The building made sounds she had forgotten. Wood settling. A faint hum from somewhere deep in the walls, the wind brushing against the siding, none of it threatening, just present. Rusty stayed downstairs. She had called him once, He didn't come. Not stubborn, just certain. Elaine didn't insist. She closed her eyes, opened them again. Time passed in pieces. When she finally sat up, the room was pale with early light. Morning had arrived quietly. She swung her legs off the bed and stood. Her body ached, her shoulders stiff, her hands slightly sore from turning pages, from gripping tools, from something that felt like effort she hadn't used in a long time. She didn't complain, just moved. Downstairs, the station looked different in daylight. The dust still there, the wear still visible, but the light changed everything. It filled the space, showed the details more clearly. The notebooks on the counter, the scattered receipts, the open compartment. And Rusty. He was exactly where she had left him. Curled near the entrance to the repair bay, head lifting the moment she stepped into view. "You stayed," she said. He stretched once, slow and deliberate, then stood, walked over. No hesitation now. Elaine nodded. "All right," she murmured. She moved behind the counter again, looked at the spread of papers, then at her hands. There was only one way forward. She pushed the notebooks gently to one side, not closing them, just making space. Then she stepped out from behind the counter and walked toward the side door that led into the repair bay. The handle stuck slightly before turning. The door opened with a heavier sound than the front, metal scraping lightly against concrete. The air inside was different. Cooler. Darker. The smell hit her first. Oil, old rubber, steel, familiar. The bay was larger than she remembered. Or maybe it just felt that way now. Tools lined the back wall, hanging from a pegboard, each one outlined in faded black marker. The shapes were still there, even where tools were missing. A hydraulic lift stood in the center, dust-covered, but intact. Elaine stepped inside slowly. Her shoes echoed differently here, more hollow, more grounded. She ran her hand along the workbench. The wood was scarred with use, deep cuts, small burns, dents that told stories she couldn't fully recall but still understood. Her fingers paused over one mark. A long, shallow groove near the edge. She remembered that one. She had made it herself. Dragging a screwdriver along the surface when she was too young to understand why that mattered. Her father had found it later. Shaken his head, then laughed. "Now it's yours too," he had said. Elaine's hand lingered there for a moment, then moved on. She picked up a wrench from the wall. The metal was cool, heavier than she expected. Or maybe she had just forgotten the weight. She turned it in her hand, adjusted her grip. Something about it felt right. Not new, not foreign, just familiar. She set it back, then reached for another tool. A socket wrench this time. Her fingers positioned themselves without thinking. Grip, angle, pressure. She paused, looked at her own hands. A small breath left her. "You didn't forget," she said quietly. Not to anyone else, to herself. Rusty stood just outside the bay, watching, not entering, but not pulling away either. Elaine turned her attention to the lift, walked over, ran her hand along the metal column. Dust coated her palm. She brushed it off on her jeans and crouched near the base. The controls were old, simple. She flipped a switch. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. Elaine stood up and looked around. The power panel was mounted on the far wall. She walked over, opened it. The switches were labeled in handwriting she recognized. Her father's. She ran her finger along them. Reading. Lights. Compressor. Lift. She flipped the one marked lift, waited, then walked back, pressed the control again. The machine made a low, strained sound, then stopped. Elaine didn't react, didn't step back. She listened, then crouched again, checked the lines, the connections. Her hands moved slower now, deliberate, testing, adjusting. She reached for a rag, wiped away a layer of grime, exposing a cracked fitting. "There you are," she muttered. She stood, grabbed a roll of tape from the bench, came back, and wrapped the connection tightly. Not perfect, but enough to test. She stood again, pressed the control. The lift groaned, then moved. Just a few inches. But it moved. Elaine let out a short breath. Not a laugh. Not relief. Something in between. She pressed it again. The lift rose higher this time, slow, uneven, but working. When it stopped, she stepped back and looked at it. Really looked. It wasn't broken, just neglected, like everything else here. Rusty stepped forward slightly, closer to the entrance now, still watching. Elaine wiped her hands on her jeans, left faint streaks behind. She didn't care. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the entire space. The tools, the bench, the lift, the floor, all of it still here. Waiting. Not gone. Not ruined. Just unused. She walked back toward the doorway. Stopped beside Rusty. "You see that?" she said. He looked up at her, then back at the bay. Elaine nodded once. "Yeah," she said softly. "Me too." She stepped out into the main station again. The light had shifted higher now, filling the room more fully. The counter, the notebooks, the hidden compartment. Everything exactly where she had left it. But now, it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt possible. She walked behind the counter again, picked up one of the notebooks, held it for a moment, then set it back down. There would be time for that. But first, she looked around the room at the dust, the clutter, the work waiting to be done. Elaine rolled her shoulders once, then reached for a rag. Because if this place was going to come back, it wasn't going to happen all at once. It was going to start with small things, things her hands could do, and her hands, they still remembered. Elaine started with the windows. It felt like the right place. Not complicated, not technical, just something she could see change with each pass of the cloth. She found a bucket in the back, filled it halfway with water from an old spigot that coughed before it ran clear. The rag she had picked up earlier turned dark almost immediately, dragging years of dust down the glass in slow, uneven streaks. She wiped, rinsed, wiped again. Outside, the trees shifted in the wind. The sky was clear, pale blue, stretching above the ridge like it had always been there, waiting for someone to notice it again. Elaine stepped back. The difference was small, but it was there. She nodded once, then moved to the next window. Time passed without her measuring it. Each movement led to another. Sweeping the floor, clearing the counter, stacking the notebooks carefully to one side, not out of reach, just out of the way. Rusty followed her through it all, not underfoot, Not distracting, just present. Sometimes he lay near the door, sometimes near the counter. Once he stepped into the repair bay, stood there for a long moment, then came back out and settled where he could see both spaces at once, like he was keeping track. By midday, the station had changed, not restored, but touched. The light moved differently now through the cleaner windows. The floor showed its shape again beneath the dust. The counter, wiped down, revealed the grain of the wood more clearly. Elaine stood behind it again, resting both hands on the surface. Breathing steady. Looking saw. Something had shifted. Not just in the building. In her. She turned toward the notebooks, picked one up, opened it. The entries felt different now. Not distant, not something she was trying to understand from the outside. She had stepped into it. Into the space where those entries had been written, where those decisions had been made. She pulled one of the receipts closer, then another. This time she didn't just read them, she arranged them. Side by side, dates aligned, amounts compared. She moved back to the corkboard, pulled down more pieces, added them to the counter. Soon the surface filled again. But this time, it wasn't scattered. It was organized. She found a pen. Old. The ink faint at first, then stronger as she pressed harder. She began to write. Not copying, not rewriting, just noting. Connections. Dates that matched across different names. Amounts that appeared more than once. Situations that echoed each other. Rusty watched her from the floor, his head resting on his paws, eyes following the movement of her hand. Elaine worked slowly, carefully. She didn't rush. Every time something lined up, she paused, looked again, made sure. This wasn't guesswork. This was structure. By late afternoon, a pattern had begun to take shape, not perfect, but visible. She stepped back from the counter, looked at what she had laid out. The notebooks, the receipts, her own notes. It wasn't random. It never had been. Her father hadn't just helped people when they showed up. He anticipated. He followed. He tracked. Not just what he gave, but what happened after. Elaine picked up one notebook again and flipped to a page she had marked earlier. A name she had seen more than once. Different dates, different entries. Car repair, no charge. A few pages later, family still struggling. Check again. Further down, paid part of loan back. And then doing better. No help needed. Elaine let out a slow breath. He had stayed with it. Stayed with them. Until they didn't need him anymore. She looked down at her own notes, at the lines she had drawn between entries. It wasn't just one person helping another. It spread. She saw it now. One name led to another. Someone who had been helped later appeared again, not as someone in need, but connected to someone else. A chain. Quiet, unspoken but real. Elaine straightened slightly. Her eyes moved faster now, from one page to another, from one receipt to the next. There, another connection, and another. She circled one of the names lightly, then stepped back again. The station felt different now. Not just alive. Connected. Like it had always been part of something larger than itself. She walked toward the front door. Opened it. The air outside had cooled again. Afternoon sliding toward evening. She stepped out onto the concrete, looked down the road. Empty. Still. But now, she didn't see it the same way. This wasn't a forgotten place. It had never been. It had just been quiet about what it was doing. Rusty came to stand beside her. She rested her hand on his back, absent-mindedly. "You see it?" she said softly. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Elaine looked back at the station, at the windows she had cleaned, at the door standing open, at the space inside where the notebooks waited. This wasn't just something her father had built. It was something he had kept going, something that had kept moving even after he was gone. And now she was standing in the middle of it, not outside, not looking back, inside. Part of it. The thought settled slowly, not overwhelming, just clear. Elaine turned back toward the door, walked inside, closed it gently behind her. The latch clicked into place. Not final, just secure. She moved behind the counter again, looked at the pattern she had laid out, then at the notebooks, then at her hands. She understood something now she hadn't before. This wasn't about reopening a gas station. Not really. It was about continuing something that didn't stop just because no one was there to see it. Elaine picked up the pen again. Drew one more line between two names, then set it down. Because now, she knew where she stood. And more importantly, she knew what came next. Elaine didn't rush it. The sign outside flickered once before settling into a steady glow, soft against the dark road. Not bright, not new, just there. She stood in the doorway for a moment, one hand resting against the frame, feeling the wood beneath her palm. Inside, the coffee pot gave a quiet click as it finished brewing. The smell drifted out past her, mixing with the cool night air. Rusty moved past her legs without hesitation. For the first time since they arrived, he didn't pause at the threshold. He walked straight across the floor, past the counter, and into the repair bay, then lowered himself down like he had been waiting for that moment all along. Like something unfinished had finally settled. Elaine watched him. Then she turned back toward the counter. The crossword was still there. Same page, same missing answer. She picked up the pen slowly, her fingers steady now in a way they hadn't been that morning. She didn't think about it long. Didn't need to. 4 letters. She filled them in one at a time, then set the pen down beside her father's glasses. For a while, she just stood there, listening. Not to silence, but to everything that had been here all along. The hum of the refrigerator upstairs, the faint tick of cooling metal, the soft shift of Rusty settling deeper into his spot. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't empty anymore either. She stepped outside again and looked at the road. Road, same darkness, but now there was a light on. Not calling anyone, not asking. Just there. And for the first time in years, she wasn't trying to figure out where she belonged. She already knew. So she left the door open, went back inside, and let the place do what it had always done. Made space for someone to arrive, because now she understood. Some things don't need to be rebuilt. They just need someone willing to stand there and keep them going. She glanced once more toward Rusty, already asleep where the work used to be. Then back at the counter, at the word she had finally finished. And she wondered, how many lives had quietly passed through here without ever knowing what held them together.